Afternoon. I want to welcome everybody here to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I want to thank them for 2 days in a row now hosting a press conference or now a policy hearing. I'm State Senator Nick Miller, represent parts of Lehigh and Northampton counties, and I have the honor of serving as the policy chair in the Senate Democratic Caucus. Today we're talking about strategies around clean air and clean water that our caucus can continue to champion in the General Assembly. We know that here, specifically in the Lehigh Valley, we've had challenges around PFAS contaminating wells. We've had, unfortunately, the rank of 1 and 2 of the highest asthma rates in the country in terms of air quality and the impact that that has. And those are just two small things that looking to get ideas on what the state can be doing to help support our communities. We know the constitutional rights around clean air and water. Really looking forward to some good discussion here. I know our leader, Senator Caucus, is going to be joining us online, as well as some of my other colleagues. And with that, we'll just jump right into it. Our first panel, today we have the Secretary of DEP, Jessica Shirley, if you want to join us up front here. And you can enjoy the beautiful view as well, too. This is our waterfront district is transforming before our eyes. It's a long time coming, and having the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission down here has been phenomenal, especially with the beautiful view of the Lehigh River. So thank you, Secretary, for joining us.
All right, I think it's on.
Yes.
Hopefully my name card is going the right way.
It is.
Thank you so much, Senator Miller, for hosting this and inviting the department to participate. I was just conversing with my legislative colleague and said I could talk for 4 days straight about some of these issues. So to whittle it down into 15 minutes is going to be a challenge, I'm sure. But hopefully this is just the start of a conversation and we can keep it going. I know we've already had a number of these conversations already. I do want to note, I suspect that we are sitting on a site that has been rehabbed, that was maybe a former use of a coal industry perhaps, and I think it's important then that I start talking about the Hazardous Sites Cleanup Act. Pennsylvania, one of the lists that I say, the list of things that I'm not proud of being at the top of, we have the most Superfund sites in the country, we have the most abandoned wells in the country, and we have the most acres of abandoned mine lands in the country. We also have the most cases of Lyme disease in the country. There's a lot of things that I'm really not proud of being at the top of the list for, and those are some of those. But I think they also present opportunities, and we have been able to show significant success in a lot of these areas with the programs that we have. HASCA is one of them. We are a national leader in the cleanup of former industrial and commercial sites because of the Hazardous Sites Cleanup Act, which was passed by the legislature in 1994. It supports the investigation and cleanup of contaminated soil and groundwater. It replaces polluted drinking water supplies, and it provides oversight of waste facilities, and it implements Pennsylvania's land recycling program. It tackles serious threats that all communities in Pennsylvania are facing, like remediating old dump sites, former smelting sites, or old industrial sites. It also helps provide residents by sampling private wells, and it provides bottled water treatment systems and some hookup connections where applicable. Under the Shapiro administration in just the last year, DEP conducted 94 investigations and cleanups, and we oversaw 15 cleanups by responsible parties, including 6 former federal military sites. We assisted EPA with the remediation of 108 national priority list sites, and we provided operations and maintenance of EPA-installed remedies at 24 Superfund sites. However, HASCA is in jeopardy due to the phase-out of the capital stock and franchise tax and the absence of general fund support. Without budgetary action from the legislature, DEP will be forced to halt cleanups, reduce staff, cut grants, and limit its response to PFAS contamination. I urge the General Assembly to secure stable long-term funding for HASCA so the Commonwealth can continue protecting residents, meeting federal obligations, and returning contaminated land to communities for safe and productive development, just like this beautiful building. Shifting over to water, we are a national leader in assessing quality of our surface waters. As most people know, Pennsylvania is only second in the nation to Alaska with the most miles of lakes, rivers, and streams in the country. If you look at the map of Pennsylvania and the map of all of our streams and rivers, it's almost all blue until you zoom in, and then it looks like a nerve ending of rivers and streams. And it's an amazing resource that we have, and it's something that we have to be very careful about protecting. Because of that, we are a national leader in assessing the quality of surface waters. And we recently published our 2006 Integrated Water Quality Report. It's online. It's very easy to see and use. We also have the Water Quality Network, which is another tool that we have for assessing water quality. And we implement water quality standards that are based on national recommendations of EPA. This is on the regulatory side of things. We set standards and then implement them in permits. We are a national leader in identifying PFAS in drinking water systems. This is because in 2013, we set the first MCL that we ever set in the state, which is a maximum contaminant level for drinking water. Typically, we use EPA's recommendations, or sometimes even the state of California, if they have an MCL. This is one where we went out, we did the research, and we did the rulemaking to establish that MCL. And because of that, in January 2024, all of the large water systems had to start testing their drinking water systems for PFAS. As of this last December, we have issued drinking water permits related to PFAS treatment for 40 public water systems and 103 different treatment plants. Watershed restoration, we work with various partners. It's really a partnership effort. We work with the counties a lot. We work with watershed organizations. We work with local homeowners. We work with farmers to implement conservation practices on their lands, including ag lands, abandoned mine lands, and urban areas to improve and restore waters impaired by sources that might be non-point sources. We also administer the Growing Greener program. We have provided over $400 million in watershed restoration since 1999. And I think just earlier this week we announced another 89 projects that total $17.3 million. Speaking of mining, I was just talking about mining creates a lot of challenges whenever it comes to water quality, particularly the abandoned mines. And since 1980, our Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation team has restored approximately 230 miles of Commonwealth streams, including the soon-to-be-completed Blacklick Creek AMD treatment plant in Cambria and Indiana counties that will restore another 25 stream miles. We have 2 additional large treatment plants slated to be in construction before 2029. I think some of those are on this side of the state. In addition, we have been working, in the mix right now, we have 62 proposed acid mine drainage projects that will cost us about $210 million. They're all in various stages of completion, and these projects are funded mostly through IIJA and AMLR funds. When it comes to air quality, you noted the high asthma rates in this area, but over the last 45 years, Pennsylvania has seen drastic improvement in air quality. One of the things that I would like to highlight is the air quality index scale that is referenced in my testimony. Since 1980, in 1980, approximately 30% of our days of the year were code orange, which is unhealthy for sensitive groups. Because of the control measures that have been put into place through permitting actions, regulations, and additionally cleaner vehicle standards, we now have about 1% of our days that are code orange action days. So Pennsylvanians are breathing better. It's cleaner today than at any point since the implementation of the Clean Air Act in 1970, but there's still work to be done. And we do that work through through our permitting measures, through our regulatory measures, but then we also have grant programs. We have our Volkswagen Settlement Fund, which created the Driving Pennsylvania Forward program. That focuses on emissions from mobile sources. So diesel emissions, particularly from trucks, which I know are you see a lot in this corridor. We have awarded over $125 million for diesel emissions. One thing that is not in my testimony that I want to make sure that I do highlight is our Reducing Industrial Sector Emissions, or RISE program. We will be announcing awards within the next few months for that program. That is almost $400 million that we've received from the EPA to specifically target industrial sector emissions. So stay tuned for that. I did mention in my opening about orphan and abandoned well plugging. In this administration, we have plugged about 350 wells, which is significantly more than we have plugged at any time over the last 10 years. However, despite this historic progress, we still have about 200 to 300,000 orphan and abandoned wells that have yet to be located in Pennsylvania. And we project that it would cost about $2.6 billion to have all of those wells plugged. Earlier this month, we released our environmental justice policy as final, and that is a culmination of DEP's commitment as an agency to proactive community engagement, enhanced public participation, and community developments and investments. And of course, we have to talk about permitting, because permitting is one of the major ways that we do protect Pennsylvania's air quality and water quality. The payback program launched in November 1st, 2023. That basically created an on-clock and an off-clock for DEP's permits. It made it significantly easier for us to manage, and because of that, we were able to clear our backlog of about 2,400 permits last August. That ensures that we are having some of the most protective standards in operation in place. You are familiar with the SPEED program, streamlining permits for economic expansion and development. This is where DEP can utilize the expertise and experience of qualified professionals to do a first review of a permit application to make sure that it is in really good quality for us to be able to review and issue a permit. We just issued our second SPEED permit. It was an air quality permit out of Lawrence County. We were able to review the permit within 77 days with the help of a qualified professional, which is about half the time of the payback program, which is 140 days. There are currently 11 SPEED applications with the department right now. I think with that, we can open to questions. I tried to go through my testimony was long. I tried to go fast.
And thank you, Secretary. I feel like, both topics, air and water, could consume multiple policy hearings. I do want to acknowledge, again, my leader, Senator Caucus, and we've got staff from Senator Fontana, Senator Tony Williams, and Senator Sharif Street as well as joined us. And if there's any questions, I'll monitor it online. I guess starting kind of broadly, we know that there's an energy adequacy challenge here in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
As part of the larger PJM grid. And energy affordability has been, and rightfully so, a hot topic. How do we balance matching the demand on the energy front with maintaining, clean air and clean water for our constituents?
I think that, oh man, I could 4 days on this topic. So a lot of folks may or may not know that the Energy Office actually resides with the Department of Environmental Protection. It's a pretty small office, but we work very closely with the Public Utility Commission, which really looks at some of those affordability issues. We are very concerned about affordability. This administration, I know Governor Shapiro, it's one of his top priorities is to address the affordability of energy for Pennsylvanians. I think it's an incredibly complicated topic, but there are opportunities out there. There are opportunities to have smarter siting with regard to both clean energy and other sources of, cleaner fossil fuel. We have seen the energy sector get significantly cleaner over the last 30 years. Most of our energy mix 30 years ago was coal-fired power plants. There are, I think, 3 of them left within the state. Nuclear energy provides baseload energy. It is zero emission energy. So I think we need to be looking at all forms of zero emission energy, including nuclear. But we also have to look at other cleaner forms of energy like natural gas that can also provide very efficient baseload energy. The governor has made it clear he is an all of the above energy governor. And we do believe that there is a way that we can prioritize or we can balance everyone's needs to prioritize affordability for consumers.
I appreciate that. And want to be mindful of the time. I think I got a ton of questions, but one program that has been successful here locally is the PennVest program, specifically around remediating PFAS from contaminating wells. Have you seen that program utilized to its fullest extent across the state? And if not, how could we be a partner in making sure it is?
I don't think we planted this question, but I am incredibly proud to say that Pennsylvania is the only state in the country that has pulled down 100% of the federal funding available to us in the state revolving loan fund. And that is because my department works very closely with PennVest to make sure that we are utilizing every dime that is available to us. We have seen, I would say, larger companies, water companies, kind of get first in line just because they were unfortunately the first to have to test because of our regulation. They are maybe a little bit ahead. So we are working with PennVest to make sure that there is grant funding left over for some of the smaller facilities. And it's all a balance based on the needs of the community that might need that.
And any other kind of barriers that the agency's facing? And again, I really do appreciate your work on the permitting side of things, balancing our environment and also getting these projects moving as well. I mean, it's something that with the SPEED program, I wish more people were taking advantage of that. To hear that just
it's picking up.
Yeah, and we've continued to push. Some of the entities that are looking at permits locally. Have you looked at this? Have you had that kind of pre-application meeting with DEP? I just think it's a phenomenal kind of tool in the toolbox to get some of these projects off the ground. But anything else that we could be helpful with, making your department more efficient, and obviously resources within the budget, and we're going to go right back into budget season here shortly. Any just general thoughts on that, how we can be better partners and continue to improve that?
No, I think it's just continuing to have a conversation, which I feel like we have been doing very well, is having those conversations. I think finding a solution to HASCA is probably our biggest priority right now, because it is such a popular program and it's just great for local communities. And any type of grant program, most of the funding that the department receives for grant programs goes right back out into communities. So not just HASCA, but Growing Greener, many of our grant programs, Driving Pennsylvania Forward. We have been able to show significant success at addressing environmental issues in communities that just putting that money back where it belongs and bringing the economics of a lot of these areas back up.
Awesome. And just take one more look. Senator Caucus, any questions for the secretary? Not seeing any online. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That concludes our first panel. We'll move right into our second panel. We've got Dr. Katie Warlow from Life Air Systems and Becky Bradley, the Executive Director of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, talking about local organization action. Becky, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Senators. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Long time. Yeah.
Long time no see. This has started out, I'm Becky Bradley. I'm the Executive Director at the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. So we're the bi-county planning commission for Lehigh and Northampton counties, but we're also the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for transportation planning. So we do a lot of things as a true regional council. And that's where I'm going to focus, how counties and regional councils can work together on some of the clean air and clean water issues that we're experiencing here in the Lehigh Valley, but also how we work with some of our neighbors. So our population has been growing consistently for over 65 years. If you average it out, about 4,500 persons per year. So we've only seen population growth. And since the pandemic, jobs have been growing faster than our population. In addition, we're in a valley, which leads to major issues globally of air quality. There are some things that we can address, and there are some things just geographically that we cannot. So working through those issues in a mindful way is a very strong focus of the LVPC. Last year, we updated a new greenhouse gas inventory to look at what our air and our emissions rates look like. If our emission rates remain the same and our population and jobs continue to rise as projected, regional emissions could increase by 9.3%, and it could be even larger with the addition of hyperscale data centers, of which we have 3 active development proposals in the pipeline now, each totaling over 5 million square feet each. So that's over 15 million square feet of additional and new forms of industrial development. That brings all kinds of electrical challenges, sewer and water challenges, water availability challenges that affect clean air and clean water. We also last year updated the Regional Climate Action Plan, which we are now calling Pathways to a Resilient Greater Lehigh Valley. It is on the wall behind you, Senator, if you would like to see it. Thank you for letting us put up the billboard. But things that we learned out of that is continuing to focus on deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, advocating for that along with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. And last year, we completed a national electric vehicle infrastructure program project with them, targeting the best locations where we could advocate and potentially increase electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We could actually reduce emissions just by promoting EVs and making the infrastructure available for them by over 285 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. Helping to support increasing efficiency of homes through various programs through the Pennsylvania Department of Community Economic Development, working in partnership with the U.S. government and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, is another way to continuing all sorts of energy and weatherization programs that could help actually with air quality, increasing the adoption of all forms of alternative energy. We are an incredibly water-rich area. We're a net exporter of water. The food and beverage manufacturing sector is actually one of the largest segments of our industrial economy, adding over $10 billion to the economy every year just in Lehigh and Northampton counties. And so we're so water-rich that water quality becomes absolutely imperative to not only jobs, but our environment. So those land use decisions to protect natural areas, farmland, and direct development away from natural resources is critical to what we do in some of our county planning work. One of the exciting initiatives that we've been working with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection on, as well as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and Lehigh and Northampton counties, is something that sounds so nerdy you're going to not listen the moment I say it. We are creating a global Act 167 stormwater management strategy for all 15 of our region's watersheds. Okay, so that is part of a state act, 167, and it is where county planning agencies are actually regulatory versus advisory to local governments on land use decisions. So we do review and approve, deny, require changes to stormwater management systems as new developments are proposed. That is absolutely integral to protecting water quality, not only here, but in other areas across the Commonwealth. In as much as we're looking at our 15 watersheds, working with DEP, they've helped us fund the ability to create one stormwater plan instead of 15 separate plans that would have taken us 15 years to do. And it also allows us, at the end of that, the state statute requires us to create a stormwater management ordinance that then both counties adopt, which then requires, after DEP signs off on it, of course, and then our local governments, all 62 of them, would have to adopt it as well. Our goal, coming out of our climate action work, coming out of all of the discussions with our sewer and water authorities, and I know you're going to hear from about that a little bit more later, is to make sure that we're coordinating those jobs, our sewer and water systems, along with our environmental goals, as well as our land use planning goals. So at the end of that Global Act 167 strategy, which we have to have a cooler name for in the end, obviously, we are going to have a region-wide green infrastructure ordinance that every new development will be judged against. And that is imperative for us to not only help make sure that we're forwarding naturalized systems, which will help us with air quality, but also protecting our water quality. And the last thing that I really want to tell you about is something that we probably haven't talked about as much as we should. And that's the partnerships that we have with our other metropolitan planning organizations and the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, who has been a tremendous partner at the table with a whole host of things that we're doing. The first component of that is we partnered with the other metropolitan planning organizations in what we call the Eastern Pennsylvania Sea. So I-80 to the north, I-81's kind of the vertical spine of the sea, and then I-78 over to the New Jersey line. That is one of the largest freight corridors in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the fastest growing one. In fact, the value of that market makes it the 8th largest freight market in the United States of America and equal to the economic output of the entire North Jersey, including the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's in-ground building development value. So we basically together form the second largest industrial district when you throw in North Jersey in the entire country, which means we actually have a global presence. So almost 90% of the freight that's moved amongst that I-80, 81, 78 corridor C, or what we call Eastern Pennsylvania freight alliance, and we formed an alliance, is moved by truck. That has a huge emissions component that doesn't help our air quality issues. But that Eastern Pennsylvania alliance, including Lackawanna, Luzerne, Berks, Lebanon, Monroe, Carbon, Schuylkill, Pike, Lehigh, and Northampton counties, it's that big, have come together and developed a joint freight plan to look at everything from jobs and movement, but to then support things like advancing partnerships with industries like Mack Trucks and Air Products, which we are home to here, to try to promote greener freight movement overall. And really, I think the very, very, very cool thing about it is out of those discussions, specifically on freight, we did a couple things, and I've got some handouts that I will leave. But we developed a project with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation that is also advisor to our Eastern Pennsylvania Freight Alliance partnership. Because what we learned out of that planning exercise and our climate action work, both in freight and our environmental work, is that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is actually the largest landowner in the Lehigh Valley. And you're like, huh? Where is all this land we own? Well, it's actually in our roadway right-of-ways, right? And so we had an opportunity as being an MPO and working with PennDOT to rethink how that system functions, which also can help improve our water quality, slow down stormwater runoff, reduce vulnerability and mitigate hazards to the transportation system itself, which should reduce the need for emergency response, but also to improve pollination corridors, reduce the labor needed to mow clover leaves and various things, and to also make our region look better. We're a huge destination for tourism. We are the gateway from North Jersey. We want it to look so amazing that you just want to stay in Pennsylvania, right, when you come here. And we want to be proud of where we live too. So we've come up with an entire naturalization strategy that we're hoping to deploy for State Route 33 And then as we plan for the US Route 22 safety, mobility, and congestion management strategy that, thank you, Senator Miller, and then PennDOT Secretary Carroll and Governor Shapiro for helping us advance, to actually come up with an entire planting strategy for our highway system here in the Lehigh Valley. We're hoping that then that can go global across the Commonwealth and really serve as the industry standard, because plants are the cheapest, easiest way for us to actually sequester those carbon emissions and to have cleaner air. So those are just some of the things that we're doing, and all the various partners that we have going. And really, it's about that partnership and that collaboration with the Commonwealth, with the federal agencies, with our neighbors, and just thinking bigger, thinking easier, thinking more, and what are your big things? What are your big, hairy, audacious goals, right, that you want to accomplish too? But thinking, how can we accomplish all of those things now and next? And so that's what we're committed to as a Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, and being a good partner with you. And we hope that all of this work that we do together can really be a spark to support some of the things that you're doing in the legislature and across the Commonwealth as a whole. Thank you.
And thank you, Becky. And Dr. Worrell, I just want to ask a couple kind of broader questions about the regional approach. And yes, being part of the fastest growing region in the Commonwealth has its challenges, right? And when we've seen this kind of development, the additional kind of stormwater runoff and management around that, and kind of could you just kind of dive a little bit deeper in how we could be a partner on addressing that, and being better partners on that, specifically the stormwater runoff, because of all this development? And I know we can talk at length what the downstream impact, but any thoughts on how we can help in that sense?
Well, I think some of the things that especially the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection have been doing, along with the legislature, the funding from the legislature that allows them to do some of these things, is allowing county planners to receive funding to do stormwater management planning on behalf of larger geographies. You get a great bang for your buck when you're doing 167 plans, and it's sure you have to look at it watershed by watershed, but you need to look at how the watersheds interact. DEP has been very supportive in us looking broader than just one watershed at a time, and supporting funding for the continuation of those grant programs is everything, because those final 167 plans and ordinances actually help our local governments and our sewer and water authorities, the Commonwealth itself, meet some of the requirements of municipal separate storm sewer regulations and other statutes. So that continued funding to agencies that then support those more collaborative efforts is absolutely imperative. We always initially think, oh, we'll put this program out for local governments, right? Because we do some small grants for some bike and ped things. But really looking a little bit broader and allowing agencies that are counties or multi-counties to come together is critical, and continuing that funding makes it even more possible.
And just one final question then, kind of regionally, you mentioned all the freight traffic, like truck traffic, the congestion that we see on some of our highways. Obviously, we took got an important step yesterday to address some of that, but any other suggestions that we could, that freight is going to continue, if not grow. That's good. How do we make that more efficient and less emissions kind of within our region from the freight specifically?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that is always a struggle and a challenge, right, is we're immediately like, oh, okay, well, what can we do to influence making the people that build vehicles, the vehicle manufacturers, to support them in building cleaner vehicles? Sure, we should advocate for that, but what can we do within the confines of what our authorities are, what tools are available to us now? So there are some things we can do, particularly with intelligent transportation systems. We've started to deploy some of those with a number of our communities in the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation on various arterial road corridors around the Lehigh Valley. So that could be as simple as making sure that your signals are timed to reduce stopping time and congestion at those lights, which reduces emissions, and that those are smart signal technologies now that, like, certain times of the week, certain times of the day, those signals change so they can move traffic more efficiently. There's even now technologies that recognize pedestrians and bicyclists. So, and the other thing that we're really doubling down on, and I didn't mention it before, and this gets back to this, is there will be the need for freight to interact, and I don't mean just tractor trailers, though that is part of it, but all of the Amazon delivery vehicles and other things to interact with regular passenger vehicles, with bicyclists, with pedestrians, with people in all forms of mobility devices. So we've really been working hard on connecting those multimodal avenues, and that's, again, something that the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and supporting them in continuing to fund transportation alternatives, set aside grants, making sure that dollars from the federal government are protected, particularly congestion mitigation air quality funds, which not only go into those bike-ped interaction projects, but in our region we leverage them into our transit agency as well, so they can maintain a state of good repair and continue to provide a mix of modes that ultimately give people realistic and honest options to make a different choice than get into a gasoline-powered car.
And thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dr. Werlow, I'll pass it to you.
Good afternoon. And before I begin, I'd like to congratulate and thank Senator Miller and all serving on the Democratic Senatorial Policy Committee, our speakers, and each of you here today for your interest in and work towards clean air and water in our great state of Pennsylvania. We're truly honored and humbled to be a part of this critical and timely discussion. My policy recommendations to the committee members come from a place of professional and therefore deeply personal experience, from a place of both pain and loss in not being able to provide adequate or optimal air quality to our patients. Allow me to explain. As a reproductive physiologist and former clinical provider of in vitro fertilization, or IVF, I never dreamed that I would be as passionate about one of today's topics, air quality or clean air, as I am. However, when chemical and biological airborne pathogens impact the level of patient care that you can offer as a provider, or in our case, the ability to help those hoping to fulfill their dreams of having a family, when common events such as traffic exhaust, construction, road paving, air traffic, building and population growth, and the airborne pathogens generated, when these events negatively impact the very cell that you're desperately trying to protect, the human embryo, you become very passionate. We, as many IVF programs globally, suffered undulations in our clinical pregnancy rates. We learned the significance of air quality from nearly 20 years of both positive and negative data. This data, these learnings, ironically, came from IVF programs located in Philadelphia, Reading, and the Lehigh Valley. A sampling and unanticipated barometer, if you will, of the air Pennsylvanians breathe across our state. Our pregnancy rates decline coincident with outside environmental events, completely outside of our control, causing a decrease in air quality. Although we were completely focused on the health of the human embryos under our care, was this data a barometer of why we are here today? The 20 years of negative data clearly defined the air quality metrics, if you will. The human embryo truly needed to be consistently and successfully grown outside the maternal protective environment for up to 6 days. Once we identified these metrics, which fast forward define the clean air initiative we're discussing today, the air quality deemed optimal to protect our citizens, whether they be in schools, hospitals, workplaces, our homes, airports, senior living facilities. Once identified and defined, and given the now known significance of air quality on our clinical outcomes, I was truly given a blank check by an area hospital CEO who said, solve this problem, purchase an air filtration system to deliver what we've been missing in our environment, to protect us from outside events. I was shocked. There was nothing commercially available to deliver these now known, clearly defined airborne metrics. And not being able to control air quality as a variable in our process, now clearly understood as a common vector of toxicity, as it is to each of us, this inability was both professionally and personally unacceptable. This is when we became passionate about air, for one reason, because it impacted our ability to better serve our patients. This struck us at our very core. With no commercial solution available, there was only one path to consider: to design a solution that would consistently deliver the air necessary despite constant and negative influences by outside sources. Because the technology was originally and frankly selfishly designed to protect the human embryo, we set the technology design bar extraordinarily high to deliver below detection biologicals, your bacteria, viruses, fungi, mold, as well as below detection chemical pathogens, basically anything that you can smell, alcohols, acetones, diesel exhaust. To achieve this on a single pass, once entering the technology, never exiting. To achieve this on a single pass without producing harmful byproducts. We chose the anthrax spore as our biological target, as it's one of the most difficult biologicals to kill. And if you're able to eliminate the anthrax spore, you provide a 9-log kill, 6 log being sterility, of all other infectious pathogens with which we are concerned. Rubeola, responsible for measles, obviously a significant uptick in our country at the time. Influenza and its variants. As we all know, the current strain mutated significantly with this round, which has infection control specialists discussing viral exposures we may be at risk with the upcoming FIFA events. C. diff, MRSA, Pseudomonas, staph, strep, TB, norovirus, SARS-CoV-2, its variants, and other highly infectious airborne pathogens. Now fast forward. Given the proven efficacy and success in the highly sensitive and demanding clinical space of IVF, and because of the proven anthrax kill, we were asked to conduct double-blinded clinical studies in both the healthcare and senior living settings, asking one question. Could the air purification technology as designed add to the effectiveness of standard or HEPA filtration in reducing illness and infection? After a 12 and 15-month study of over 8,255 adult med-surg patients and over 75 senior residents, the short answer in each study was a resounding yes. Each study demonstrating very similar results. By dramatically reducing or removing infectious airborne pathogens still typically persistent after standard filtration, this dramatic removal resulted in a statistically significant reduction in hospital-acquired infections, illness, length of stay, obviously just in healthcare, staff call-outs in both settings, and as a result, improved economic metrics and productivity. Our clinical studies in IVF, healthcare, and now senior living are sharing, if not screaming, a common theme. Air quality is critical in health and wellness across a continuum of care, from the very beginning of life with the human embryo, to the children in school, to adults, and to our seniors. So with the unique knowledge that we now have, what can we do to protect all in our great Keystone State? In my mind, I see this as a three-pronged approach. Number one, strategic use of the Rural Health Transformation, or RHT funds, towards improved indoor air quality in our hospitals, in our schools, in senior living. Driving improved patient care, wellness, and reduced cost. But we need your help. How do we navigate the process to provide support and ensure the protection of our Pennsylvania citizens? We'd welcome the chance to work with your office, Pennsylvania hospitals, senior living, schools, and the CMS to structure a pilot that makes Pennsylvania the proof point from across the country, significantly improving clinical outcomes, developing stronger rural hospitals, and a highly efficient use of existing federal funds. Number 2, increase awareness. You can't manage what you don't comprehensively measure. What is the indoor air quality in our schools, in our airports, in our hospitals, in senior residential spaces, where we work, our homes? Knowing its clear impact on health and wellness, can funding support a broader application of testing so that we better understand our own environment? We can absolutely manage what we measure, empower our actions, and empower ourselves with data. And 3, minimize, reduce the sources of poor air quality, work but with extreme deliberation to assure that our state grows but responsibly, so as to protect our existing green infrastructure and citizens. We continue to learn from our installed base in IVF, in healthcare, senior living, commercial office spaces, and airports. We learn from their data and the ubiquity of the impact of improved air quality. We continue our clinical studies about the unseen, yet negative and consequential impact of infectious airborne pathogens, both biological and chemical, on health and wellness. And it is for this reason, patient care, that we continue to work, continue our passion, continue to push and optimize the technology as well as its applications. We applaud the work of our fellow speakers and Senator Miller and the committee members who brought us here together today to discuss this critical mission. We applaud the visionaries, our customers, and our partners who have embraced the significance of air quality and its unforgiving and unyielding impact. Finally, you should be exceptionally proud of some absolute visionaries in the greater Lehigh Valley and Philadelphia areas who have taken the critical steps, the ultimate steps, to provide clean air to protect their staff, their patients, their residents, and their travelers. St. Luke's University Health Network, Jefferson Lehigh Valley Health Network, each across multiple campuses. Ben Franklin Technology Partners, Northeast Pennsylvania on the Lehigh campus. Phoebe Ministries, Senior Living in Allentown. Lehigh Valley International Airport in their new terminal, and others. And on that visionary note, we thank you for attending today's critical discussions, all towards the health and future of our great citizens.
Well, and thank you. And we can happily connect you and have a conversation about the rural health funds. The state was awarded $196 million roughly. Definitely we can have a conversation about who we can connect you with to have that conversation. My first question, and I'll see if my colleagues have any others, when you've kind of gone into some of these nursing homes or the airports or hospitals, in layman's terms, how poor was the air quality versus, and I know your technology and what it does afterwards, but kind of just generally, what was the standard of the air quality that you were seeing?
I would say most of the infrastructure was quite old and antiquated in its filtration capacities. HEPA filtration was designed decades ago, and now there are other technologies that are far superior to deliver improved air quality, which just by removing some of the persistent airborne pathogens that exist in a lot of buildings, you're going to improve improve wellness.
Yeah. And you mentioned schools and education funding, and specifically around facilities has been a priority for my office. And these schools are filled with lead and asbestos. Mm-hmm. Harrison Morton, just a couple blocks from here, was built 152 years ago. I would be very curious what the air quality of that education facility is, and it's as I'm taking notes, I'm thinking, what kind of air quality testing could we do across nursing homes and airports and education facilities that we could set a standard, and as a data-driven person, mm-hmm. having that data then allows us to make some investments in addressing it. So
yeah, no, there's some renowned assays to detect, bacteria, viruses, fungi, mold, as well as your volatile organic compounds, the chemical pathogens as well. Far more important than the particulates.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just kind of generally, any kind of partnerships, or have the partnerships between these government entities that you've been working with how can they be enhanced? How can we be better partners for the private sector as you're addressing these? Obviously, you're kind of leading the innovation, being that there was not a commercial solution and you developed that technology. How can we be more helpful in that effort?
I mean, this was really done for patient care and wellness. So if there's any way to work together, like the RHT, and just expand the broader use of the technology and its application to make a greater impact on wellness, that would be immensely appreciated.
Yeah. All right, we'll definitely be in touch on that. I'll just double check if any of my colleagues have any further questions. Seeing none, thank you again. That concludes our second panel. Appreciate your
Thank
your
you.
time here this morning and testimony this afternoon. That moves us to our third panel, Academic Institution Insight. We have representatives from Penn State Extension and the Children's Environmental Precision Health Institute at Lehigh University. All right, Aaron, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Miller, for the invitation to speak today. My name is Erin Frederick, and I am the state coordinator for the Penn State Extension Master Watershed Steward Program. Like many extension services across the country, Penn State Extension offers several volunteer programs, including 4-H, Master Gardeners, Master Food Preservers, and Forest Stewards. The Master Watershed Steward Program was introduced in 2013 in response to the state's water quality issues and the need for substantial community engagement to address them. Non-point source pollution, the term for pollution generated from a wide area that cannot be traced back to a single outlet, remains the biggest challenge facing surface water quality in Pennsylvania. Including stormwater runoff, acid mine drainage, and excess nutrients, non-point source pollution flows from hundreds of thousands of individual sites throughout the Commonwealth into Pennsylvania streams and rivers. There's no existing body of government regulators and conservation professionals alone that can adequately address this problem. According to the DEP, 2026 PA Integrated Water Quality Report, of the 85,568 miles of streams and rivers in Pennsylvania, a total of 31,451 miles are considered impaired. So that's more than 1/3 of all the streams. Our program first launched here in the Lehigh Valley, and at that time, community watershed associations and other environmental nonprofits, both locally and across the state, were struggling to recruit and retain volunteers to assist in their educational programs and restoration projects. In outreach across the Lehigh Valley, we repeatedly heard that people were interested in conservation and that water quality and environmental conservation were incredibly important, but they felt that they didn't know enough to engage effectively. So we launched the Master Watershed Steward Program to fill that need. We specialize in volunteer management, partnering with conservation districts and other local organizations to add services for restoration, education, and outreach programs in the community. The purpose of the program is to ensure the ongoing support of local water resource-focused volunteers who are knowledgeable, engaged, and supportive of partnering organizations. After demonstrating success in the Lehigh Valley, we received funding from the DEP Growing Greener program, and that allowed us to launch the program in other areas of the state. Sustainable funding has been sought through county governments to continue running the Master Watershed Steward Program over the years. However, this has become more challenging as counties face shrinking budgets. Even though we currently only have funding to run the program in 28 counties, we now have 1,080 Master Watershed Steward volunteers across 55 counties. We have found that volunteers are willing to drive to projects and programs outside their home counties, realizing that watersheds do not conform to political boundaries, or they choose to participate through remote work. I think this also shows the demand for the program throughout the state and the interest in protecting water resources. The program offers 40 hours of training in a broad range of environmental resource topics, including groundwater, stream ecology, wetlands, soils, geology, native and invasive plants, water recreation, climate science, and stormwater management. The participants are also introduced to local professionals and organizations within their own county or region throughout the training. And then following this classroom instruction, the participants in each training class are required to complete 20 hours of volunteer service in their first year. Once those 20 hours are completed, they earn the official title of Master Watershed Steward. And then to maintain their title, they must contribute a minimum of 20 hours of volunteer service and 10 hours of continuing education every year. The volunteer and training opportunities are curated by Master Watershed Steward coordinators. These coordinators connect with local nonprofits, municipalities, and other community organizations for their volunteer needs. The coordinators ensure efforts are strategically aligned with local priorities, reducing duplication and maximizing impact. The volunteers can pick and choose what they'd like to do based on their availability and interests, whether that's planting trees, wading into streams to take water quality samples, or running webinars or writing articles. The program is open to all skill sets and abilities. No experience is necessary, just a desire to give back to the community. The program can be tailored to address state and local needs. For example, there are hundreds of restoration projects installed across the state, but few resources to help maintain them once they're established. Our volunteers can assist with this. We can also offer training to volunteers to give presentations on specific topics such as stormwater management, plastic pollution, or native and invasive plants. It's really based on the community's educational needs and the issues within that community. We have also recently partnered with the Department of Agriculture to incorporate education on the Pennsylvania fertilizer law into our watershed-friendly certification program, which offers guidance and resources to help people protect watersheds in their homes and yards, and allows residents to complete a simple online application to qualify for watershed-friendly certification. Master Watershed Steward volunteers have filled critical gaps in local conservation capacity, revitalizing watershed associations, stepping into leadership roles, and serving on municipal committees where decisions about land use and water resources are made. In 2025 alone, Master Watershed Stewards contributed 51,871 volunteer hours, and this is valued at over $1.8 million. And in those hours, they educated 142,000 adults and children about water stewardship. They planted 32,000 trees and 9,500 native herbaceous perennials. They restored 12.8 stream miles. They helped install and maintain 352.5 acres of naturalized habitat. They removed 152 acres of invasive species, dispersed 707 rain barrels, removed 6,755 gallon bags of trash from the environment. They conducted water quality monitoring on 352 sites on 201 streams. They set up educational displays and connected with residents at 308 community events. They organized 295 educational presentations, taught students about the environment in 141 schools. They led activities qualified for MS4 permit requirements in 254 municipalities. And they assisted over 200 community partners with education and on-the-ground projects. Again, this is only 1 year of data. Since the program began, our volunteers have planted over 136,000 trees across the state and contributed over 250,331 hours, and that is a value of over $8.7 million, all in volunteer time. So our program continues to grow. We are actively recruiting for the 2026 class. My hope is that we can develop funding streams this year to continue to guide the investment of millions of dollars worth of volunteer time and energy and millions more in on-the-ground projects. So thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to talk about the program. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure, just one quick question. As obviously, the Lehigh Valley have a lot of farmland and a lot of farmers, agriculture. When you've interacted with them, have you seen any or got any feedback on challenges that they're facing that we could be helpful with? Just in the, obviously Pennsylvania has a huge agriculture sector, and the farm show just wrapped up, so that's top of mind. Just so in your work here, have you come across any specifics there that we could be helpful with?
I know in terms of interfacing with our program, we have had some Master Watershed Stewards help with installing conservation practices on farms, helping with riparian buffer installations, and really just helping to get the outreach on that.
Okay.
But it really does vary area by area. Some master watershed sewer programs work much more closely with farmers. In other areas, it's, you know, a bit more urbanized, and we're focusing on, you know, backyard stormwater management.
Right. Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for the work you do for our community.
Thank you.
Yeah. Doctor, thank you. Just hit the button, the clear button there. Yes.
Good afternoon,
Great, yeah.
Senator Miller and the members of the Senate Democratic Policy Committee. It's a true honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to testify. I am an environmental epidemiologist, so I'll be limiting my discussion within the context of health implications of air pollution. And in particular, I want to start my testimony by evoking your memory of June 2023 Canadian wildfire, which migrated to Pennsylvania area. So if we recall that event that lasted about a week, you know, the overall, Pennsylvania was not so badly affected. The overall code for Pennsylvania was orange, meaning that it's concerning, but it's not too bad. But it's within certain pockets of Pennsylvania that experienced purple. So in Easton, where I live, we were beyond code purple. You know, we were just off the charts. And yet, you know, I saw a number of people carrying on as if, you know, it was a normal day. So there's a reason why I start my testimony with this recent event. That is, Pennsylvania has made tremendous strides in improving the legacy air quality. But if we look at certain pockets of Pennsylvania, there are certain areas that are still disproportionately affected by air quality. So it's with this context that we have to recall that within certain pockets of Lehigh Valley and also in Allentown, there are certain census tracts that have the worst in the country in terms of the prevalence of cancer in the nation. And we are also number one in terms of, well, number 1 to number 5 in terms of childhood asthma. The area-specific burden of legacy air pollutants, specifically nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter with aerodynamic diameter less than 2.5, sulfur dioxide, are borne disproportionately by populations of color and also indigent population. My team and I recently completed a study looking at newly classified carcinogen, namely ethylene oxide. Ethylene oxide concentration in Allentown is anywhere between 10 to 350 times greater in certain pockets of Allentown compared to the level that's recommended by the US EPA. So with that in mind, I mean, this is pretty troubling statistic. So what is it that we can do? Is that we, at the Lehigh University Institute of Children's Environmental Precision Health, we are focused on collecting data, measuring as the concrete step towards giving you evidence to developing area-specific policies that are appropriate for pockets of populations that bear the disproportionate burden of air pollution. We are focused on building a very nimble information analysis and dissemination of easy to understand information, such as geographically based information where residents could just click to certain areas in the map to understand pockets of areas that are most disproportionately affected by ethylene oxide, for example. So we have certain maps that are available and ready to be dispatched. To understand the pockets of such disproportionately affected area, we also need to lead education campaigns. So we are working very closely with local justice, social justice organization, namely Promised Neighborhoods of Lehigh Valley, to lead the awareness campaign, namely Lunch and Learn sessions, to learn about the harms of legacy pollutants, and to practice actionable causalities. That is, what are the steps that the residents could take to prevent and protect their health and well-being. So to summarize, I want to emphasize the fact that continuous collection of hazardous air pollution, whether they can be seen or not by naked eye, is critical for protection of the public, and in particular the vulnerable segment of the population. Data sharing, data across the sectors through multi-sectoral data sharing is also very critical. We at the Institute within the Lehigh University, we are working on building expedient data analysis and data sharing platform with the goal of making that available publicly as soon as possible. And finally, we're not here to give you any kind of a silver bullet, as the examples in New York City and also in California has shown us amply that such a silver bullet solutions do not exist. But locally adopted pocket population-driven solutions seem much more effective. So we're working towards giving you solutions that are population and locally adapted and driven. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my testimony and open the floor for any questions.
I've got one quick question. That oxide legacy, is that what drives that? Is that exhaust, or is that?
So legacy pollutants are dramatically different from emerging class of pollutants such as PFAS in the sense that they are driven largely by commercial traffics and or coal burning, which is still a very important emission source in the state of Pennsylvania.
But the ethylene oxide specifically?
Ethylene oxide has a very complex sources. So it's a very challenging pollutant in the sense that it's used by sterilization facility. But it's also generated by cigarette smoke, automobile exhaust. Even human bodies generate ethylene oxide. Trees generate ethylene oxide. So it's a very season, context, pollution-dependent pollutant.
Got it. Okay. Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you again for your testimony. I appreciate it. That concludes our third panel. Moving into our final panel, the stakeholder input, representatives from Penn Future and Sierra Club. Adam, if you want to kick us off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity to testify here today and appreciate the other members of the committee who are present and their staff. My name is Adam Nagel, Director of Government Affairs for Penn Future. We are a statewide environmental advocacy nonprofit. I will summarize my testimony as best I can, as I know you have all of it, and in accordance with time constraints. So, Senator, you mentioned obviously one thing I just want to highlight briefly. Allentown possesses one of the highest asthma rates in the country. Last year, it finished third, according to a report from the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, which was actually an improvement. It led the nation in 2021, 2023, and 2024. Under that same report, on a personal level, I was disappointed to note that my hometown of Rochester, New York was second last year, so that was a little sad for me. But the one thing I really wanted to highlight is it's not just Allentown in Pennsylvania. We actually have 3 Pennsylvania cities in the top 20 and 5 in the top 50, and they cover from Northeast, Lehigh Valley, Southeast PA, Central PA, and Western PA. So this is something that is obviously impacting residents across the Commonwealth. The Lehigh Valley also has a legacy of an industrial legacy that certainly still elicits pride in residents, and as many parts of the country experienced when industry left, it forced the valley to essentially adapt. That has created many opportunities, but also come with new challenges. So there are lessons to be learned as we look ahead to other things that are emerging, like potentially the proliferation of data centers. I'll focus on a few areas in my testimony that just to highlight. First of all, as was mentioned, the budget. If I could just amplify something that Secretary Shirley mentioned and by chance appears smarter by association. I have had the pleasure, this will be my 3rd budget under our President and CEO, Patrick McDonnell, who served at DEP for a long time, including as Secretary. The past 2 years, he has flagged for me personally HASCA funding within previous budgets and proposals. I hope that this year perhaps he will flag it for me that he's no longer concerned about that. So I would just echo Secretary Shirley's comment about sustainable, recurring, and sufficient funding to support that important program. One other thing about budget that I will highlight here is sort of a result of last year's budget agreement and something to look to fix in the budget process ahead, which is the significant reduction in general fund dollars for the Department of Conservation and National Resources. Obviously, that funding was backfilled with revenue from the Oil and Gas Lease Fund. As we have learned with other departments, including DEP over the years, funding department operations with special accounts is not necessarily the most sustainable way to fund government operations that Pennsylvanians ultimately deserve and rely upon. In the case of DCNR, it serves a critical role in promoting conservation, sustainability, and outdoor recreation. Failing to provide proper resources, that department could hinder its ability to continue operating state parks and forests, as we have all come to expect, which would have dire consequences for surrounding communities that rely on these sites, often as economic engines. So just one thing to flag on budget. As mentioned, we are looking at a potential proliferation of data centers across the Commonwealth. They are already here. They've been here for years. We are starting to see more and more on top of that. There is a fairly significant overlap in why data centers or developers or tech companies are interested in coming here that mirrors largely warehouse development and distribution center development. Cheap land, cheap taxes, obviously abundant available resources. The warehouse and distribution center boom that obviously took place here in other parts of the Commonwealth brought with it opportunities, significant job benefits in some areas, but also challenges for municipalities and residents that has, in many places, led to significant backlash and opportunities to essentially try to hopefully handle the data center development a little bit better. Like any large-scale land use, data centers do have benefits and drawbacks. There are 3 major concerns with data centers from an environmental perspective, from Penn Future's perspective: impervious coverage, water usage, and power usage. With hyperscale and multi-building campuses becoming more common, the conversion of large areas of forest or other natural ground cover to building and pavement risks, dramatically altering wildlife habitat, stormwater runoff, and ecosystems. Data centers often use water-based cooling systems that can consume hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per day, potentially depleting aquifers and surface waters. These facilities also use enormous amounts of electricity, putting strain on our electric grid and driving demand for more power, often generated from harmful fossil fuels like frack gas. Building on our own work around warehouses and distribution centers and anticipating the challenges presented by data centers, Penn Futures actually created a local model ordinance. It is linked in my testimony. I'm happy to share it too, for municipal officials who are looking to plan ahead in anticipation of this development. I would just urge for the staff and any members from Philadelphia specifically that the model ordinance does not apply to Philadelphia. It's focused mainly on smaller municipalities, but that doesn't mean that it can't. So I would just flag that for any members from the Philadelphia area. So we appreciate the interest shown on the topic of data centers and how to best handle them by the committee in a previous hearing last year, and we also recognize that several members of the Democratic Caucus have put forth policy proposals to provide resources to municipalities, increase transparency and accountability around data center development, promote clean energy and energy efficiency, and help ensure that the associated costs are not passed on to consumers. I will transition a little bit to water very quickly. One of the other ways in which Pennsylvania is a national leader in an unfortunate way is that we also have the largest combined sewer overflow problem in the United States. This does not necessarily impact Allentown, as it is on a separate system, based on my understanding, but we do have 120 permitted combined sewer system communities, creating a combined 1,540 outflows that release untreated sewage and wastewater directly into our waters. That obviously, has numerous impacts for human health, threatens aquatic life and habitat, and impairs the use and enjoyment of our rivers, creeks, and streams. Penvest has certainly done an admirable job in many ways to provide funding to municipalities to upgrade our aging water infrastructure. However, certain prerequisites written into state law also make it impossible for some municipalities to access grants or forgivable loans, and these typically are mid-sized to large cities. For example, Pennsylvania state law currently requires that a utility have a separate rate for water and sewer charges. This prevents municipalities like Philadelphia, who have a single combined rate for drinking water, sewer, and stormwater services, from obtaining grants or forgivable loans. This barrier can and should be dismantled, and is something that Penvest is legally able to modify within its regulations to allow waivers of this requirement. Another aspect of this is that you have to demonstrate that a project will result in a 15% rate reduction in customer rates. This does tend to impact large or mid-sized cities the most, because in order to do that, the rate reduction would exceed the entire Penvest funding budget by itself, thus outright disqualifying these large and mid-sized cities whose residents are no less deserving of equal access to clean water or more affordable rates, to be blunt, than those who live in smaller cities and towns. There are several options to address this barrier. Two simple solutions would be to amend the statute either to a proportional limitation or to allow waivers that would give equal access to this critical funding to all Pennsylvanians. There's also a third option that actually, again, Penvest has the authority to do under the Clean Water Act. And this would apply, we hope, more towards Philadelphia. There is an underutilized provision of the Clean Water Act which essentially permits Penvest to provide additional subsidy to communities like Philadelphia that do not meet state affordability criteria, if that additional subsidy will be passed on directly to residential customers who would otherwise experience financial hardship without the subsidy, or if the additional subsidy is awarded to projects that will mitigate the impacts of stormwater runoff, which is a huge problem in Philadelphia and the Delaware River. We believe that Penvest should use this provision to minimize debt service obligations for cities like Philadelphia, to help fund critical infrastructure projects to improve water quality and better maintain affordable water utility rates for residents. And lastly, I will just touch upon something that was released last week. Senator, you mentioned energy affordability with Secretary Shirley. Relatedly, Penn Future and Conservation Voters of PA released our own energy affordability agenda. Many of the ideas contained within that agenda are not necessarily new, but they have grown more urgent as concerns around affordability and grid reliability have become more acute. There are steps that the General Assembly should take to promote clean energy sources, the first being update and diversify Pennsylvania's alternative energy portfolio standards to increase renewable energy sources from 4% where it currently sits, to 35% by 2035. Increase energy production and reduce price volatility. 2, establish fast-track permitting for clean energy infrastructure with clear environmental safeguards for new renewable energy production, storage, and transmission. 3, incentivize battery storage deployment while establishing producer responsibility for recycling and safe end-of-life disposal. The goals of clean air and pure water are attainable. We can achieve these through leadership from state lawmakers in the face of federal retrenchment on these important issues. We should embrace the challenge and recognize that there is a great opportunity here. Pennsylvania is uniquely positioned to advance policies that will protect our natural resources, improve public health and environmental outcomes, diversify our energy portfolio, and prioritize affordability for residents. The time to act is now. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony here today, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Adam. We'll turn over to Jen Quinn, and then I got a couple questions for the two of you.
Right. Thank you, Chairman Miller and members of the committee for this opportunity to testify on improving air and water quality in Pennsylvania. I'm Jen Quinn. I'm the legislative and political director for the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club being the nation's largest and oldest environmental advocacy organization. Given the broad topic we had, I'm going to focus on 3 different issues: preventing harm from further PFAS contamination, investing in proven tools by increasing funding for growing greener, and anticipating risks from data centers. PFAS, often called forever chemicals, persist in the environment and the human body and are linked to cancer and other serious health effects. In Pennsylvania, PFAS contamination from Class B firefighting foams has polluted groundwater at military bases, airports, and training sites across the state, most notably in Bucks County, forcing families to use bottled water and costing millions in cleanup. Firefighters themselves face elevated exposure from these foams and PFAS-treated gear, and cancer is now the leading cause of line-of-duty deaths. The General Assembly has already taken an important step. House Bill 1261, which passed the House unanimously in 2025, would phase out PFAS-containing firefighting foams while preserving exceptions for federally regulated facilities. The bill also directs the state fire commissioner to support the transition to safer alternatives and allows grant funding for foam replacement and disposal. Senate Bill 980, sponsored by Senator Yaw and Chairman Miller, thank you, Chairman, is the companion bill. This is a bipartisan, practical solution that prevents new contamination, protects drinking water, and supports first responders while aligning Pennsylvania with many other states that have already acted. Passing this legislation is a clear opportunity to make immediate progress on both water quality and public health. And honestly, it's kind of an easy layup for you guys if they can get 203 votes in the House. We know that you can do it in the Senate. Switching to Growing Greener. So Growing Greener launched in 1999 with strong bipartisan support. It's Pennsylvania's flagship environmental program. It has delivered real results, restoring watersheds, reclaiming abandoned mine lands, preserving farmland, and investing in parks and water infrastructure in every region of the Commonwealth. But funding has fallen sharply since its mid-2000s peak, even as the backlog of need has grown. Pennsylvania still faces thousands of miles of impaired streams, hundreds of thousands of unplugged oil and gas wells, and major unmet needs in our state parks and forests. Now, when I meet with legislators, they tend to always say, yep, we love Growing Greener, but the question they always ask is, where does the additional funding come from? And thankfully, there are quite a few options. There are some more in my written testimony, but we can tax skills games, right? Dedicating a portion to Growing Greener, reallocate a small share of existing online gambling revenue, legalize and tax recreational marijuana, directing a portion to restoration like Montana does. Enact a natural gas severance tax tying extraction to stewardship. Pennsylvania is an outlier when we do not have an extraction tax on gas. Issue voter-approved bonds, again, for Growing Greener 3. Other states successfully use outdoor gear excise taxes, severance taxes, and voter bonds for conservation. Increasing Growing Greener funding accelerates proven, cost-effective restoration for healthier waters, resilient communities, and a greener Pennsylvania. Now, for data centers, I don't think you're legally allowed to have a hearing in Pennsylvania without talking about data centers at this point. So data centers are essential to the digital economy, supporting cloud computing, AI, and other services. At the same time, their rapid growth presents emerging risks to Pennsylvania's water resources. As of late 2025, at least 21 hyperscale data centers were in planning stages statewide. A single large facility can use up to 5 million gallons of water per day for cooling, roughly the daily water needs of Harrisburg. Much of this water is consumptively used through evaporative cooling, and national data show that data center water use is already in the tens of billions of gallons annually, with sharp growth expected as AI demand increases. In Pennsylvania, water pricing significantly undervalues this resource. Fees through the river basin commissions remain very low, often resulting in annual charges of only a few $1,000s for withdrawals of tens of millions of gallons. This subsidizes large industrial users and constrain public water systems, private wells, and aquifers, especially during droughts or in areas with clustered development. Small municipal systems may also face infrastructure and cost pressures that are ultimately borne by residents. To manage these risks and support responsible growth, the legislature can require annual public reporting of data center water use, including sources, establish minimum efficiency standards for new or expanded data centers, provide incentives such as tax credits or expedited permit approvals for use of recycled water, rainwater harvesting, or co-location with wastewater treatment facilities, create a dedicated fund supported by large users for infrastructure upgrades, well remediation, and drought response without shifting costs to ratepayers, modernize water pricing and thresholds. Backup power is essential for data center reliability. However, the scale and clustering of diesel generators at data centers raise new permitting, operational, and siting challenges that existing frameworks were not designed to address. Other states have begun adapting their policies, and Pennsylvania can do the same. Large data centers typically install dozens and dozens and possibly dozens and dozens of diesel generators to ensure uninterrupted power. While these generators operate infrequently, typically during testing or emergencies, they emit nitrogen oxides, or NOx, which contribute to smog and ozone, and fine particulate matter linked to asthma and cardiovascular disease. These impacts are magnified when generators are co-located in large numbers, sited in residential areas, and operated in regions already struggling with poor air quality. The General Assembly can clarify and strengthen how DEP evaluates large backup generator fleets by requiring DEP to aggregate emissions from co-located generators serving a single campus. This prevents projects from avoiding review by dividing generators into multiple smaller projects and separate permits. The General Assembly can restrict routine testing during daytime hours and poor air quality days. They can require monitoring, record keeping, and public reporting of run hours and emissions. You can also link incentives like tax credits to cleaner backup technologies like batteries. These measures balance economic opportunities with protecting our water as a public trust and ensuring cleaner air. Proactive policies now prevent future burdens on communities, utilities, and the environment. I know that was a lot. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, a couple just thoughts and comments. I mean, the PFAS bill obviously passed by the House and in the Senate. I think we talk about it almost every day in my office, how we get the committee to move that bill and get that done in the Senate. We're working on it. I feel positive where we are right now, but long overdue, especially protecting our firefighters.
I will just flag that Senator Mastriano has some questions for DEP, and that seems to be the holdup we're hearing. So if we could get those answered, it would be great. We're being told that's the holdup. I don't know if that's really the holdup. But just, well, I'm flagging because you are the one to get it done. I know you can get it done. Yes.
So we're on it. Yeah.
Great. Yes, we are enthusiastic about the bill.
And just some thoughts. Obviously, we've held a policy hearing on the data centers up in NEPA. I don't doubt that we'll have another one, just given the impact that we're seeing across the board. And also probably a policy hearing post-Reggie. How do we, sustainable energy long-term in Pennsylvania? Just two notes there. I do have a question from Senator Kane and Haywood that I want to ask before I ask my own, but this one's related to school drinking water. Just kind of will give it to the two of you here, but on behalf of my colleagues, Senator Kane and Haywood, they teamed up with Devlin Robinson to introduce Senate Bill 759, which would set health-based standards to require school districts throughout Pennsylvania to remove the threat of lead in school drink water and provide a $10 million a year grants so that all school districts across Pennsylvania could replace old lead-contaminated drinking fountains with lead filtering hydration stations. Could you please comment about the environmental, educational, and public health benefits of passing this bill and removing lead from school drinking water? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think we all know that lead is horrible. It causes developmental issues. It's not good to be in the environment in any way. I mean, nobody should be around lead. It's terrible that students are, so many communities across Pennsylvania are dealing with, lead in their drinking water. So, I mean, we would be absolutely supportive of that bill. I can't see any reason to not support it, given that, yes, we all know the harms of lead.
Yeah.
seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And appreciate the bipartisan interest in that. And yeah, I see no reason why that would not be supported by anyone. So.
Just generally thinking about, long-term, the funding solutions needed. Obviously, you mentioned skill games and the legalization of marijuana that have been proposed. Clearly, there's additional revenue needed for supporting these long-term, and definitely my commitment and working with my caucus and my colleagues to, we're right back into another budget cycle. Blink of an eye later. I will look for any of my colleagues if they have any other questions, but I really do appreciate the conversation. Obviously, there's a lot more in the weeds and in-depth conversation to be had about some of these solutions. But I looked at, I know Senator Costa is on, any other of my colleagues that have any questions or any closing remarks? All set? Okay. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. We do record these. We do summarize them. We'll pull some of the policy ideas that we'll work with our colleagues. Really do appreciate everybody taking the time, and safe travels, obviously, this weekend with the pending snowstorm across Pennsylvania. Wishing everybody safe travels. So thank you again. This concludes our policy hearing, and thank you again to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission for hosting. Thank you.